Good evening. Welcome to Spectrum Debate number 9, whether you're watching on YouTube, Google Plus, or elsewhere. Tonight I have some fantastic guests for you, and they're going to join us in a discussion about 2014. This is our last show of the year, and as a Christmas present to you all, not only am I wearing this delightful Christmas jumper, naturally selected for me by my mother, but we don't mention that. We're going to be talking about the whole year in review here in the UK, the European Union, and the world beyond. So if you've got a particular topic or a particular event that you'd like us to talk about, tweet us. You can tweet us using the hashtag SpectrumDebate, singular, and of course during the discussions you can tweet our guests and tell them what you think. Challenge them, send them questions, facts or information, and I'll try and put as many of them to them as I can. If you're watching on Google Plus, you can of course also use the Applause app, which will tell us how popular and how much you like or dislike what is being said by any particular guest at any particular moment. This is our last show of the year. I'll tell you later on what we're going to be doing next year. We're going to be having a few differences and a few new ideas brought in. But this week, I'm going to get our guests to introduce themselves to you all, and we're going to begin with the stalwart of the show, someone that you probably all know quite well, and that's your friend and mine, Lily Jane Summers. Hello, Lily.
Yes. Hi, Gareth. Hi, I'm Lily. I'm a Liberal Socialist. I'm from the Labour Party, and I hail from the lovely city of Stoke-on-Trent.
Thank you very much indeed. Another returning guest who appeared on our first show, it's Harry Samuels. Hello, Harry.
Hello, my name is Harry. I'm not especially politically affiliated. I'm from Cornwall, Caernarfon, and I am a first-year student of classics at New College, Oxford.
I'm assuming that was Cornish that we got there.
It was, yes.
Thank you. Our next guest is another returnee. It's Councillor Matthew Hulbert. Hello, Matthew.
Hi there, Gareth. Yeah, I'm Councillor Matthew Hulbert. I'm a Liberal Democrat councillor in Leicestershire, and I'm involved with a number of organisations, including Compass and Republic.
Thank you very much, Matthew. The next of our first two new guests tonight is Alessia Kesana, who is... Did I get it right?
No.
Oh, you see, I was so close, so close.
Yeah.
Kesana.
Yeah, you got it.
You see, I got it right in the rehearsal. This is appalling. Hello, Alessia. I apologise first of all for the fact that we keep destroying your dinner for you, but please introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm the one who gets the dinner destroyed all the time, and I'm in London where I study history at Birkbeck. That's pretty much the most important thing about me. It's such a history geek, and I should have been born in the 18th century.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed. And our final guest is also new to us. Hello, Adam Keeley.
Hi, my name's Adam. I'm the Conservative representative tonight on the debate, and like Harry, I am very politically affiliated. A lot of my mates consider me very political and sometimes get annoyed by that. And I've just received an offer to Manchester Uni, so I hope to go there.
Wonderful. Thank you all very much indeed. As you see, a great array of guests from all over the political spectrum and indeed from all over the country and Europe. Tonight, my name's Gareth. I'm broadcasting tonight from Cheshire, the heart of England. I'm, of course, on the border of Wales, so not far from Adam. I'm so sorry, Adam. We are here tonight to talk about the world. We're going to begin. We've already had a few people tweeting us suggestions, talking about Ed Miliband and his role and performance as leader of the opposition. Someone here at Pirate Lennon, Mark Chapman, is telling us the topic that's hardly been noticed, the loss of civil liberties. So drip, ripper, secret courts, legal aid cuts, etc. We will come to that. Daniel at Danielle Who is saying Scottish independence referendum and Crimea. Things that we will also talk about tonight. Thank you very much. But we begin by talking about the first lot of elections that we had this year, which were the European elections. And Cameron, at Cameron_surname, has suggested this topic. I've retweeted that, and he's tweeted the results of those elections, which, as many of you will know, saw a party other than the Conservatives and Labour win a national election for the first time in 80 years. So, who'd like to start us off by talking about the European and local elections from earlier on this year? How about Matthew? I'm going to come to you, Matthew, because of all the stories from this year's European elections, perhaps the fact that the Liberal Democrats, a party of government, was left with just one MEP at the end of them was one of the biggest stories that everyone sort of didn't notice.
Yeah, I mean, it was not a good election night for the Liberal Democrats. I think we expected it to be bad. We probably didn't expect it to be as bad as that, losing 91% of our MEPs. Thank goodness we weren't totally wiped out. And the wonderful Catherine Bearder represents the Liberal Democrats in the European Parliament. And I might say that I think just the one of her does a much better, a much more positive job than the 20-plus UKIP MEPs. So, one person can do a really good job. But no, it was not a good election night for the Liberal Democrats. And I think at the top of my party, the wake-up call that they needed, that we're in trouble if we don't start promoting ourselves a bit better and saying, talking more about the positive things we've done in government.
No, thank you. Lily, the Labour Party, of course, should have been expecting to win these elections, shouldn't they? They are hoping to form a government next May. They've got a government they're facing with one party deeply unpopular and the other party implementing what many would say is really harsh cuts in public services. Why didn't Labour win the European elections?
Well, I think for a start, we did our campaign in the wrong way. I mean, our campaign was primarily based on living standards, on growth, essentially on the economic argument. And I wrote about this at the time. We didn't seem to fight on immigration. We didn't seem to fight on European Union reform. So I think for a start, our campaign wasn't in the right message. Ed Miliband seemed to take the European elections as just practice for the general election. Secondly, we didn't really take on UKIP as much. I mean, I'll say to the Liberal Democrats, fair play to them to doing a pro-European Union argument. The Labour Party didn't seem to really tackle UKIP. They just seemed to went after the Tories. And generally, UKIP used that populist message against the European Union. So in many ways, you would expect UKIP to do better than the Labour Party, because remember, UKIP came ahead of Labour in the last European elections. And since 2009, UKIP has seen a boom in European elections. But I would say, Gareth, just to finish off, I wouldn't really put the focus on the Labour Party. I would focus it more on the Tories. This is the first ever time in the whole election for the whole United Kingdom that the Tories came first and third. Never before has the Tories came third in a nationwide election. So I think the focus is on the Tories, not on Labour in particular.
Adam, it's a fair point, isn't it? I mean, this is a party that normally does well on the European issue, and yet the Conservatives lost 7 of their MEPs, coming third overall. Not a good story.
It's not the best story. I was watching the coverage of the European Parliament elections from very early on in the evening. The Conservatives, they lost overall. They only lost 3 members of the European Parliament. They lost 7 places, but they only lost 3 politicians actually who had stood again in 2009 for the 2014 elections. The Labour Party had a lot of, they didn't talk about the European question at any point during the debate. They've just had a leaked document being released about how to tackle UKIP, and it's the Conservatives of a party in government, the Labour were a party in government, and they came third. It wasn't, I wasn't overly surprised. A lot of people have been going from the Conservatives and UKIP, from the Conservatives and Labour to UKIP. A lot of it was, to be honest, I view a massive amount of it as a protest vote. I spoke to a lot of people who were protesting over it, who would usually vote Conservative, vote Labour, or even vote Plaid Cymru, and actually decided to vote UKIP just to shake up the Westminster Party. So I wouldn't be massively surprised that it was the Conservatives who failed the most in this.
Thank you very much. Now I'm going to come to Harry and Alessia in a moment, just to give you a few of the comments that people have made online so far. Will Bates at William Bates UK is telling us that the Lib Dem MEP gets a lot of coverage in the European Parliament due to the ALDE, that's the Liberal group in the European Parliament, funding most of their publications. UKIP and the Conservatives spent about the same, but Labour spent less than half. So those are some interesting points. Alex Ward at Mr. Alex Ward, it's not a useful election to base the forecast for a general election, because it has a much lower turnout. There's a protest aspect of the vote. Cameron, and Will Bates adds here that the Lib Dems had a bad day, partly because of the D'Hondt system, the D'Hondt list system. They got 1 million votes but only 1 MEP, whereas the UUP got 88,000 votes and 1 MEP.
Can I pop in at some point just there?
Yeah, by all means.
It was just going back to the 2009 European Parliament elections, which Lily, like UKIP, came above the Labour Party. Indeed, that was right. They got nearly 2 million votes. Did they repeat that in 2010? They didn't even get 1 million votes. They got just over 950,000. So I expect that that's probably going to be the same in the 2015 general election.
Okay, fair enough. Another point here. This is just about the panel. Cameron again, like lots of things, festive. I love how predictable Matthew is. Already in with a shot at UKIP. There's nothing to say on that one, really, is there, Matthew?
Really?
Okay. Right, okay. Harry, Alessia, who'd like to talk to us about this at this point, from the point of view of someone who isn't going to be at all tribal?
I will.
Go on, Harry.
I find it incredibly funny that we talk about the European elections and have done, even on this esteemed panel, as if they're national elections. We've already said that Labour campaigned on the cost of living crisis. The Conservatives campaigned on being strong in government, when actually none of those things have anything to do with the European Parliament. UKIP campaigning on the European question as if there was any way that MEPs in the European Parliament could vote to have a referendum in Britain on whether to leave the EU. I just think it was a massive missed opportunity at increasing awareness of how the European Union works. And when we have a cycle of misinformation in this country which feeds this culture of Euroscepticism that we have at the moment, it's very, very important that we take these opportunities to educate citizens and say European Parliament is a completely separate thing, general election is another completely separate thing. That aside, I don't think you can use the European Parliament elections as any indicator at all of how the general election is going to go. It's another midterm election, just like council elections, where you have lower turnout, different voting priorities, and people who often just want to take revenge on a government and give them a bit of a whipping for a few years. So I think the result of the general election will be completely different. And personally, I was very disappointed that the European election was taken to be some kind of national election fought on domestic issues rather than a European election fought on the European issues, which, whether you like it or not, affect us all.
Thank you very much. Alessia, we'll come back to you in a moment, Matthew. Alessia, what do you have to say on this?
I just wanted to add something I found really weird about this country is that the European election and local election came at the same time. And in my area, we are in East London, the only one that they actually fought in campaigning was the local election. Even UKIP, which you would expect to go out in mass to get into the European Parliament, they were fighting the local election. It's like everybody got fed up with the local people and everybody tried to get into that one, but the European election, no material, no people coming to the door or anything. Found that quite interesting to notice. It's like a missed opportunity, like Harry was saying.
Yeah, and there are several people online who are commenting who'd agree with you and Harry on that one. So, for example, again, someone else who's already been on this show, Ian, at A Confused Ninja, do people view the European Parliament as a joke? Is it because they aren't well educated in how the EU works? So they'd certainly agree with you on that one. A couple of the other issues that people have mentioned here. We've had, where are we? Chris G. At Chris G 0000. UKIP spent as much as the Tories and far more than Labour. The EU is supposed to be UKIP's issue, but they maxed out at 26% on a low turnout. And he's already pointed out that no governing party since 1984 has won the European elections. Charles Fifield, at Charles Fifield, Euro elections are often a protest vote, but can create change. For example, the Greens in 1989, who got 15% of the vote, if I remember correctly, and that prompted a change in interest in the level of environmental concern. And UKIP in 2014 on the immigration issue. Final, an interesting point here. This is the last couple I'll read out before I ask for some more comments on this, and then we move on. David Jeffrey at David Jeffrey _ By the way, one of you has the volume on for this, and it's very distracting. So I don't know if you can turn it down a touch. pointing out here that the Lib Dems spent 1.5 million per seat in the European elections. The Greens 178,000. Oh, hello to your Gareths. The Conservatives 156. The SNP 133,000. UKIP 123. Labour 51,000. Ben doesn't seem to agree with something Adam said. And Joe Pattinson is pointing out that the very nature of those elected into the European Parliament is quite concerning. Maybe it's time to take it more seriously. Right. One of you, I'm going to have to tell off in a moment. Who's got a comment?
I have.
Well, I just want to come back.
Okay, you go, Matthew.
Thank you. I just want to comment on something that Harry was saying.
Okay, hang on one sec. I'm going to pause you all. One of you's got speakers on, which are pretty near your microphone, and we're getting a lot of feedback. And it's someone who's not got headphones. So I don't know if anyone could do something about that.
Gareth?
That's better? A little? Right, Matthew, go.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to come back on something that Harry was saying. I totally agree with him that the European elections should be about European Parliament and European issues. The one party, though, that did make it about that, other than UKIP from the negative point of view, was mine, and we lost 91% of our MEPs. So, you know, I don't know whether that has more to do with the current state of the Liberal Democrats than it does about the fact that we concentrated on European issues. But it's just noticeable that, you know, we absolutely did try and make the positive case for being in the EU, and the public clearly didn't like that. So I don't know how that fits with what he was saying.
Okay, I'm going to come to Harry now. Give me a second, Harry, because I muted you, because I think it was your thing that was causing the problem here. How do I see what happened now is I've muted Harry, and I can't work out how to unmute him. Right, Harry,
is that better?
Go. We can hear you.
This is going to be very controversial, but the Liberal Democrats campaigned on the positive message of being in Europe, which was distorted by the whole media frenzy about all this immigration that we've got, and 91% or however many percent of Lib Dem MEPs were lost. I think that's because the public was wrong. We have, like I've explained countless times, we have a cycle of misinformation and miseducation about the EU, where we have people say it's like the EU SSR, and as if it's one politically homogenous body, and it's just not true. If you educated people on the institutions of the EU, how it works, what is at stake during elections, and actually in some way had like a gentleman's agreement between parties to fight the European elections on European issues, we'd see a much different result, and we'd see a much more sensible British public on this issue, rather than one that just cries immigration and votes for the purplist party.
Thank you very much, Harry. And I think I'm going to just mute you again while you're not on. There we are. No, I'm failing miserably on this score, aren't I? Oh, you've gone. Brilliant. That's excellent. Right, okay. A couple of other points people have made, and then we'll move on. I think we'll talk about Scotland, the Scottish independence referendum, and the rise of the SNP and how that's all worked. But on the European issue, Stuart Crow at Stu Crow is telling us that few people in May gave any thought to the complexion of the European Parliament. Voters saw it as a stick to beat established parties. He also says he had dozens of people telling him, as a Tory council candidate, well, of course, we'll be back in 2015, but we want to protest this time with UKIP. Will Bates is pointing out UKIP have campaigned on European issues, for example, TTIP, and they spent 1.6 million on billboards alone. Where are we? And Dylan Morris is saying that my Christmas jumper is a wonder to behold. Thank you, Dylan. I always knew you were a gentleman of immense taste and sagacity. David Jeffries asking if he's tripping. I think that's because of the sound issues. Hopefully we've sorted that out now, David, and you'll be rest assured that you are drug-free right now. Chris G is pointing out that he enjoyed Harry expressing the thought that the reason people voted for Eurosceptic parties was due to a lack of education. I will give you a chance in a moment, Harry, if you want to. And Daniel saying the Greens also campaigned on EU issues. Don't forget that. And I think from the thing I tweeted earlier, the Greens also went down in the vote. Harry, did you want to just respond to that at all?
Not especially. I think I've made my point quite clearly.
Okay. Anyone else then?
Well, just to say, Gareth, the Greens, of course, did gain an MEP.
They did, despite losing 0.5% of the vote or something, I think it was. I might have got that wrong, though. Short-term memory here. Right, anyone else want to add anything on the EU before we move on to Scotland?
Well, we actually promised an EU referendum. I just want to make sure we actually, unlike the Labour Party, who are not talking about it, and who have offered it in the past, who have offered under Michael Foot to get out of the economic community, we actually want to give them a referendum. So after an attempted renegotiation,
which of course has nothing to do with the European Parliament election, but okay.
Well, it does a bit, yeah.
Okay, thank you. My muting of Harry seems to have had no effect whatsoever. I only did it to stop poor David thinking he was tripping. Right. Our next issue, Scottish independence. As we all know, earlier on this year in September, after the culmination of several years of campaigning and work and victories by the SNP at the Scottish Parliament elections, there was a referendum on independence for Scotland from the United Kingdom, which ended up with about 45% voting yes and 55% voting no. This would have been the biggest single change to the United Kingdom since its creation when Scotland joined in 1707, arguably, although there is the Irish question that was certainly a big event. I don't know if anyone would like to start talking about this one at all. I like it when my guests are silent.
Triumph of democracy.
Yep, fair old point there. Anyone else? Lily, it wasn't good for the Labour Party, was it? The whole Scotland affair, because it appears to have created, out of nowhere, a situation where Labour is now struggling in a place that it could generally bank at least 40 to 45 parliamentary seats, and now the SNP seem to be pushing everyone away before them.
Well, I think in many ways we sacrificed the party in the name of the country. I think one thing that Gordon Brown did rightly was, I think he created a different interest group or pressure group, united with Labour, I think he did. And I think the problem that Labour Party did in Scotland is they were too close to the Tories. They were working very closely with Better Together. That was in the interest of the country, making sure the United Kingdom stayed. But in many ways, we sacrificed our soul for the country. But in terms of 2016, Gareth, and next year, the notion that the SNP are going to absolutely thrash us, is slightly premature. We've got a leader now. Let's wait and see. I don't think the SNP is going to do as good as people say, especially when you see oil price dropping down to $60 a barrel, and you're seeing that the economic effects of independence would have been disastrous.
I've seen the first pronouncement from Scotland's new Labour leader, Jim Murphy, appears to have been getting rid of the ban on alcohol at football matches. Is that what's going to save Scottish Labour?
Well, it's only one policy, Gareth. Come on.
Is it the big launch?
Alcoholic policy when it's only just one. There's many policies that we need to change. For instance, we need to promise to get rid of Trident out of Scottish waters. There's many policies that we need to do. Just give us time, Gareth, okay? He's only been elected earlier this month.
Trident klaxon. Matthew, was that?
Hi, yeah. I just wanted to make the point that, it's really interesting this year that the SNP, the Yes campaign, obviously lost the referendum, but certainly won the campaign. The SNP's membership is just short of 100,000, I think, now, having been just over 20,000 at the time of the campaign. Certainly the campaign seems to have energised the politics in Scotland, the likes of which we don't really see elsewhere in the UK, sadly. But I think there is a case to be made. I don't agree with the SNP on independence, but I think there's a case to be made that Nicola Sturgeon is probably the politician of the year. In many respects, losing the referendum was certainly good for her. You know, it resulted in her becoming First Minister, and of course the first female First Minister, which I think we ought to welcome. The first female leader of a national government in the UK since the aforementioned Margaret Thatcher. And you know, I think the SNP have had a pretty good time. Now, it's interesting that Scottish Labour have elected Jim Murphy. I mean, I personally believe that they should have chosen, I think it's Neil Findlay. I think the idea that Scottish Labour can win from the right of the SNP is a nonsense, and I think we'll see that next year and in 2016.
Just to interrupt you for a moment, Matthew, Will Bates has commented here, the Lib Dems are likely also to lose seats to the SNP. Their campaign in Scotland seems to be the typical tactical Lib Dem one. It's not great for the Lib Dems anywhere, not even in Scotland, is it?
Well, look, it's a difficult time for the Liberal Democrats in government, and I think part of that is because we've not lived up to our values enough. We've certainly done some good things. I think the pupil premium is good. I think they're taking many people out of income tax. Moderately paid workers is good, but we've not talked up enough some of the good things we've done in government. And to be frank, Gareth, and I've been perfectly open about this, you know, I think we've not been led terribly well either. So I think next year is going to be difficult. We've got to try and do the best that we can and get the best result that we can and ensure that there's a Liberal presence in Parliament, and then rebuild after that.
Thank you very much. Adam, I'll come to you in just one second. A few comments for everybody from our audience so far. We've had Cameron S. say the SNP tried to bend the referendum in their favour. Edinburgh agreements, which they now hate, and many Scots couldn't vote. He also points out that the SNP says we can base our economy on oil at a minimum of $127 a barrel, and 3 months later it's below $60, which I think was a point that someone's made here as well. Chris G, unionists in Northern Britain have lost their nerve. We won, but not by making the case for our 300-year-old union. Weird times, a possible Labour SNP alliance ahead. Could there be a worse result for the people of England? David Jeffrey, he objects to the point that you said, Lily. Labour did not sacrifice the party in the name of the country. You effed up the campaign and you took Scotland for granted. Dylan Morris, I sacrificed my soul years ago, but it wasn't for the UK. The devil just promised me fantastic hair, and I guess he delivered. I'm sure you're absolutely right on that one, Dylan. It's not something I would argue with. Two final points, and then Adam. Stuart Crow, Westminster subcontracted the No campaign to Labour, and they made an almighty mess, which bodes ill for Labour's general election fight. And a confused ninja, Ian. People got engaged because they felt there was a difference between yes and no, and they're not sure they feel the same in other elections. Adam.
Well, it was interesting to see what the new leader of the Scottish Labour Party, Jim Murphy, said. He said, we will not lose a single seat to the Scottish National Party. He actually said that. Well, I bet the odds are great on that. I just want to say that. I think Labour are probably suffering the most because because obviously Scotland is a very socialist country, and we can all agree with that. You know, the Conservatives have only just started to get their vote share back up. The SNP staggering in the polls, very well, sorry, in the polls, and Labour are losing because of their allegiance with the Conservative parties in the Better Together. But you know, they didn't allow UKIP in the Better Together campaign, which, to be honest, I think they probably should have. You know, they've elected a UKIP MEP. The UKIP have got a lot of votes in Scotland, and I think that they should have been included in the Better Together campaign. I think we should have had a referendum on Scotland. I think it was important. It's a very big issue now, and I think there'll probably be another referendum, and I wouldn't be surprised if Scotland do go independent. The arguments were there economically. They could have been a very rich country, but that was dependent mostly on oil. And if you know, you just look at the price of oil now, and that's going down. If that had gone down after the independence referendum in the event of a yes vote, then the SNP would probably, their poll rating would go down.
Thank you very much. Now, Alessia, you have the joy of seeing this independence movement of someone who's living here, and isn't aware, perhaps, as so much as our other panelists are, of the rivalries and the friendliness between the four nations of the Union of the UK. How did you view the Scottish independence referendum?
Okay, as a person separated from my historian that would have cried for the last 3 days in case they broke the union. Well, it was. I agree with. I think it was Cameron who said that it was too much of a one party against everybody else instead of an actual making a case for the independence. And there's someone else who said that on the other side they didn't really make a case for the union. I forgot who it was the name because I have a very bad signal, so I missed some of the things to say.
Don't worry, I can't. I've got lots of tech tweets here, and it's hard to find one like that afterwards. But yes, someone. Oh, Chris G made that point. Yes.
Okay, so I generally agreed with that. From an external perspective, it seemed that the campaign itself was based on making it a party political thing more than actually making a case for either separating or going, as it happened for the O. It was like very central, and now it didn't feel. If I were someone who would have had to vote, it would have been almost impossible to make a mind outside of an actual having some kind of affection for the union, because there was no real case of what the future would have been like, if it makes sense.
Absolutely. I have to say, I found in the latter parts of the campaign, the point you made about it being occasionally a bit more partisan, a bit more about a particular party rather than the issue, and that seemed a bit of a shame to me. Matthew, I think you want to make a point here, don't you?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to come back for a moment on what Adam was saying in regards to the Conservatives, and he said that Scotland was a socialist country. I think there is an argument that it does pretty much have a social democratic consensus today, but as a point I think Gareth has made on previous editions of this programme, the Tories, I think I'm right in saying, Gareth, did used to be one of, if not the largest party in Scotland, if you go back.
In the 1950s, we were the last party to get over 50% of the vote was the Conservatives, and 55, I think it was. Yeah.
So that's a more recent thing that has tended to be a more social democratic consensus. I think we can't let this issue go by without making mention of Gordon Brown, who obviously is stepping down at the next general election, being an MP. And I think obviously his political record, some good things, some bad things, but I think there's no doubt at all in my view, and I think Alex Salmond has said this, that his intervention in the campaign in the final few days and the speech that he gave, which I must admit, watching it on TV was one of the best political speeches that I've heard in recent years. I think that did have an impact, and although I don't think he by himself saved the union, I think he was one of those who was responsible, and that's not a bad final act as an MP, really.
Okay, a reminder at this point, a public service announcement and also a call for guests, that one of our shows in January, who am I going to have to mute here? Lovely, thank you, Harry. One of our shows in January is going to be devoted entirely to the issue of what happens next in England, in English devolution. Show. It's going to replace one of our regular debates. It will be a Sunday show. So whatever your view on that, if you're in favour of no devolution in England, English votes and English laws, city devolution, regional devolution, or an English parliament, get in touch, because I'd like a great panel on that show with a different set of views covering all of those, and we will talk about that in depth for the whole programme, because of course, as we know, that's been raised hugely since the Scottish independence referendum. Adam.
I'm going to embarrass myself now. I've completely forgotten what I was going to say.
Don't you worry. Well, let me give you a few comments people have made, and then I'll see if anyone wants to say here. Happy Saturnalia at Blue Liberal 1. I love his normally. Here we are. Neil Findlay, you highbrow, he says to you, Matthew. Leader of Labour was told to stay away in the final 48 hours of campaigning in Scotland, and that was a genuinely new thing to happen. That was Chris G. We've had Charles Fifield here telling us the level of votes needed to get an MP elected in Scotland varies hugely. For Labour, it was 25,000 votes per MP, up to the Conservatives needing 412,000 for an MP. A confused ninja, when do you think the next referendum will be on Scottish independence? I'll ask each of you that. That'll be the final answer. It'll be a quick one from each of you. When, if ever, do you think there'll be the next one? And Happy Saturnalia, Tories once dominated by exploiting the working class sectarian Protestant vote, and I think it's fair to say that the working class sectarian Catholic vote was also exploited by Labour. I think it was one of those things, thankfully, we've moved on from hugely. Joe Pattinson, an alternative highlight of the Scottish referendum. David Coburn, I say no more. Naturally, as the host of this, I have no view on anything, but lol. So there we are. Right, so I'm going to finish on that point. I'm going to ask each of you, before we move on, the next issue we're going to talk about will be civil liberties in general. We'll have a few minutes on that. But I'm going to ask each of you, when, if ever, do you think there will be another Scottish independence referendum? Adam, sorry.
Adam. I've changed the name now. Well, at least you got my name wrong instead of pronouncing it wrong. Let's just say
yes, that. I'm so sorry.
All right. I'd say another referendum probably within another generation, probably within the next 20 years. And if it's all dependent on whether Westminster actually delivers the vow that they gave. If they don't deliver the vow, then it'll probably be sooner. If they do deliver the vow, then it'll probably be much later on. But I do think there probably will be another referendum in the lifetime, and there is a very strong chance that they will go independent now.
Thank you. Alessia, when do you think there'll be another one?
I guess when people will feel more confident about how to go, or in a way when the next generation is going to be the one actually controlling it, it might be. So probably in our lifetime could be a guess.
Thank you very much. Matthew?
I hope it won't be for a very long time, but it'll certainly be interesting to see whether the SNP put it in their manifesto for 2016. I mean, theoretically speaking, Gareth, of course, if they put it in their manifesto for 2016 and get another overall majority, that would be a mandate to hold another referendum. The SNP are in a bit of a bind in that sense now, aren't they? Because their members will expect them to put it in their manifesto. But whether they really would want to fight a referendum campaign quite so soon, I don't know. But theoretically, it could be in just a few years' time.
Thank you very much indeed. I've not given him much notice. Harry?
5 years.
Anything else to add on this one?
Yeah.
Harry?
Everyone who says that Gordon Brown saved the Union, I disagree massively. I thought his speech was dull and uninspiring. But that goes back
to... He was one of them.
Well, no, lots of people say, oh, how Gordon Brown made me cry. No, I think he was dull and uninspiring. But then again, that goes back to the comment that I made in the first week of this, that Scottish politics in general are very boring. I think there'll be another referendum in 5 years.
Thank you. Lily?
I don't think there's going to be another referendum. I think the question is, if there would have been a yes vote, would there have been another referendum? No, because the Scottish nationalists would say, well, we've made our vote, you know, we're never going to have it again, it was a vote for a generation. So if we can't have another referendum if there was a yes vote, why should there be another referendum if there was a no vote? Plus, Westminster would have to agree. Why should we agree to another referendum if the Scottish nationalists at the time said, this is a vote for a generation, we're only going to have one referendum. Okay, you had your referendum, you lost, get over it. Okay, so I don't think there's going to be another referendum.
Thank you very much. From a personal point of view, I honestly think there will be another referendum within the next 5 years. And I think that's because, particularly if at the next general election, the SNP have any particular force or weight in the House of Commons, and if, as seems possible, of course not certain, but possible, they do indeed win a majority at the next Scottish election, I see no way, or in fact no moral right, for them not to hold another referendum, and so I think we'll definitely be seeing one before 2020. But that is just my view. Thank you all very much indeed for your comments here. I'm going to ask you all in a bit as well a question recommended by Daniel. Who is your MP of the year? In fact, I'm going to ask you two things. Who's your MP or politician of the year? So it may be someone from the UK or it may be someone from further afield, and I'll come back to that later. Now, our next topic that someone has suggested is we talk about civil liberties. There have been a lot of changes over the last couple of years. There's been RIPA, which of course was introduced 12 years ago or so and has been amended. We've had various other issues this year to do with the last few years to do with the extension of civil liberties, the issue of spying and GCHQ, and so on. I don't know if anyone wants to start talking on this one and anything any points they'd like to raise. No, apparently not. Adam.
Oh gosh. Ooh, I don't know really. Can you expand on the question?
Certainly, it's basically, I mean, talk about it in general if you want, rather than necessarily things that have happened. But are we as individuals living in the UK, are we actually free? Do we have privacy? Is it the right amount? Does the government need to take more powers in order to access things like emails and what we do online to keep us safe? Or is that an invasion of our civil liberties that goes too far, for example?
I think, let's just compare the UK to other countries. Let's compare the UK to Iraq, where they've got ISIS on the top. ISIS are a terrible organisation. They're killing innocent people. That's what they think is right. They think they're doing it in the name of Islam. You've got Muslims in this country saying it's bad. And if you compare it to Iraq, then I'd say we do live in a free country. We have the Human Rights Act that Labour brought in. Obviously, we want to bring in a better, which I would say a better bill, a Bill of Rights and Responsibilities that would act for the British people. But I think we do live in a free country, yeah.
Thank you very much. Anyone want to take a contrary point here, just to liven it up a little?
I'll just ask Adam, what's wrong? What's
Harry.
wrong with the Human Rights Act?
Okay, Lily, you're raising a particular point. Go on.
Yeah, I was just going to ask a quick question, Adam. You said you want to, or the Conservatives want to bring in a British Bill of Rights, but in that case, why do you want to get rid of the Human Rights Act? What's the problem with the Human Rights Act to turn into a British Bill of Rights?
Adam.
That's a good question. Well, apparently, I think the Human Rights Act, in a way, is sort of abused in a sense that it's very hard to deport terrorists. You just look at the terror. I've forgotten his name. Is that Abu Qatada or something like that? Is it? Yeah. Who it took ages to deport, and we had to respect his human rights. And I think the only way, fully, I think the best thing to do really is to withdraw from the European Court of Human Rights, and I think that would be the best situation. But I think a British Rights and Responsibilities, which would benefit the people who live in Britain.
Thank you very much, Harry.
I can't quite comprehend the silliness of what's just been said. First of all, what makes the rights that we have fundamentally, intrinsically different from the rights of other people? Surely if they're human rights, they are universal rights, and that we shouldn't need a British set of rights just to suit our purposes when something doesn't quite go right for us. The reason we took so long to deport Abu Qatada or whoever is because there were concerns over torture. And if you've been reading the CIA report into enhanced interrogation techniques that have been used, you'd realise that why we had such issues with that. We are a civilised country that attempts to protect the rights of everybody and keep people free from torture and duress and things like that. And we would have been irresponsible to send somebody overseas to be tried with evidence gained through torture. That's the Abu Qatada issue. The fact of the matter is that the Human Rights Act just enshrines the European Convention of Human Rights into law. That's all it does. And that is good. The ECHR contains all the same rights that I'm sure everybody agrees with. And if you were to go down that list of rights and ask somebody, well, which one specifically do you disagree with? I doubt there would be any that anybody fundamentally disagrees with. I have to say, I don't think the convention goes far enough. There are too many caveats on those rights. As for other things, to say, well, we're free then because Iraq's not free it's a false dichotomy. And I think that the government has massively let itself down over the past few years by invading our privacy, by getting into our business under the pretense of terrorism. And I think that I agree with one of the American founding fathers, I can't remember which one it was, who says that any country which seeks to curtail liberty in pursuit of security deserves neither. The individual rights of individual citizens are fundamental and paramount, and to say that snooping on my emails will protect us all from terrorism is something that I do not accept for 1 minute.
Yeah. Thank you. Right. Adam, I don't know if you want to have a quick response to that.
That's a very good point. I've just been told, actually, I'm talking to somebody now, and she's just told me that I got told, and that's a very good point. I think you got yourself. There's a good point there. Going back to the European Court of Human Rights, there's many reasons that we should withdraw from it. I just want to touch now that I'm not a hard Eurosceptic. I'm not, pro Eurosceptic, get out of Europe now. But I think it's time to leave the European Court of Human Rights because they can overturn, rules that we've happened here. There was problems. I just want to touch on liberties and being free and all that. There were problems with when same-sex marriage, for instance, when that came in, and there was an argument that that vicars and people would be forced to marry a couple that they don't believe is right. Thankfully, that's not the case. However, a lot of stuff that's arisen has said that the European Court of Human Rights that a case will be presented to them, and they may give the leeway to force somebody to conduct a same-sex marriage, which is against their beliefs. And the one is voting in prison. A lot of people believe that you have a right to vote. Great having a right to vote, but you should not be allowed to vote in prison. That's for sure. Considering that you've basically voted, you want to vote, and you've totally gone against the law. I think the European Court of Human Rights, and a lot of people have presented their case to the European Court of Human Rights, especially saying that they want the right to vote in prison, and I think that's wrong. And I think if we withdraw from the human rights in Europe now, I think that's probably the best thing to do.
Okay, thank you. Now, a few comments from people before I come back to my guests here. A few people agree with what you've been saying, Adam, and others do not. Chris G makes the point here that the Human Rights Act removes your right in a democracy to change important laws. The right to privacy is having real impact. The idea that Brits are incapable of producing a Bill of Rights designed by Brits for Brits, meeting our community standard, is nonsense. Pyro's Green Hat. Pyro Annis, here we are, it's a good name this week again. A person in London is filmed on average 300 times a day. Some freedom that is when you're spied on like that. Edward Reach, comparing our civil liberties to Iraq to suggest we're relatively free. Are you having a laugh? And Cameron S., the problem with the ECHR is that we have to be nice-ish to terrorists, which is wrong. Right, Alessia, Matthew, who'd like to come in on this one?
Yes, thank you.
Go on then, Matthew.
Oh, Alicia, go ahead.
No, you had a point to make.
Okay.
Go on, Matthew.
Yes, I mean, I just wanted to come in with the greatest of respect to Adam. It's one of the most preposterous arguments I think I've ever heard. I mean, human rights are either for everyone or they're for no one. And what Adam seems to be articulating is that he wants to choose the rights that certain people can kind of pick and mix human rights. Well, I mean, either, as Harry has said, either they're for everyone or they're for no one. You can't just have human rights for people that we like, and for people that we don't like, not allow them to argue that they've got human rights. I mean, I think that's preposterous, as I think is the comparison with Iraq. I've never heard anything so ridiculous. But I think there's a wider argument and question to be had, and we might not have time to go through this tonight, but it's something that actually Tony Blair raised in his last speech as leader to the Labour Party. I don't often quote Mr. Blair, but I think he asked a good question here when he said, how do we be both open and secure? And I think the answer to that question is one that our leaders, our political leaders, are still grappling with, and will become increasingly important as the years go by in the 21st century. How do we have open societies and yet still be secure?
On this point, Matthew, sorry to interrupt you, but someone's tweeted something I think is relevant to the point you're making, which is an interesting one for you to respond to. This is the Hangover Hamster at Hangover Hamster. Can I just say, some of you have the most wonderful Twitter names. I think the best one on the show tonight is probably Harry's at Curious Cabbage, but some of you at home, they are wonderful. But this is a really interesting point for Matthew here. People who want freedom are idealists. We should see what they want when a terrorist attack takes place every other month. Matthew.
Well, I mean, it's interesting, Gareth, that obviously we're broadcasting at the end in terms of international news. And I don't begin to have an answer to how you be both open and secure. I mean, you know, we all want to continue to live in an open liberal democracy, but there's no doubt that there are threats both within and without, to kind of misquote Margaret Thatcher. And you know, I think our leaders across the political parties and across the governments of the UK have not begin to think about that. I mean, I suppose UKIP try and have an answer, and they have their, you know, let's just draw up the drawbridge and be Little Britain and not try and engage with the world. Well, I think most of us would think that that's a pretty nonsensical argument. But how we be both open and secure, I don't pretend to have the answer, but it's something that our political leaders are going to have to decide on pretty quick.
Thank you. Alessia, anything to add on this one?
Well, it may be a bit controversial, but on one side I agree with what he just said about universal rights. If we have rights, they have to be for everybody, not for people we like. But I think the other guy on Twitter had a point on the fact that we have this great idea of liberty, but at the end of the day, we live in a world that is not that perfect. And as much as if we want liberty, we need to take on the responsibility of realizing that we need to protect each other. So while I don't really agree with what the governments do to protect people, that doesn't mean that liberty and rights are going to be top of everything, and all be all of what we should be as a society.
Is it? Do you find, Alessia, that there is a real problem with politicians sometimes using the excuse of security to reduce your rights as an individual, or have you not really found that to be a problem at all?
It may be a bit of a problem with people trying to push their own agenda when they get into power. It's like, I don't think we're going to end up like in 1984, but there's always this problem with someone in power. They're going to be able to do something that puts them to do what they want. In this country, I don't think the problem is as big as in others. I've seen in the news way too much from America these days that the problem with abuse of powers is an actual real problem that is having people getting killed over it. But yeah, there is indeed the theoretical possibility, and sometimes way too practical, that they may abuse the idea of security to get into it.
Super, thank you very much indeed. Adam, I think you wanted to make a particular point here about Iraq.
Yeah, there was one Iraq. Come back to that one. I've just seen. Am I allowed to mention a comment that I've just seen on Twitter?
Oh, of course you can.
I've just had someone by, is it @ReachEd, and it says, Adam, give us one example of a cleric being forced to conduct a same-sex marriage anywhere in the EU. #tumbleweed. There isn't one. Okay, there isn't one. But there is an event that might happen in the future where a case may be brought to the European Court of Human Rights for that, and I very much think that will happen. Off that subject, back to Iraq. When I was comparing it to Iraq, because I've just seen a lot of people are disagreeing with me on that subject, that I'm comparing it to Iraq. I did compare it to Iraq in the sense that let's compare the rights that they have over in Iraq and the ones that we have here. We are able to practice the beliefs much better over here.
But do you think they're comparable countries to be comparing, Adam?
Well, let's have a look at a country that doesn't have a very good action against faith, and let's have a look at a country that really whose rights are quite abused, and let's look at this country who has a freedom for. Sorry, I'm losing myself here. Let's have a look at this country who wants to expand on its British values and its British culture, and let's have a look at who wants to promote other religions as well. You know, there's a lot of far-right extremism popping into the country now. We've seen the Britain First Party come up. You know, they've got more likes than David Cameron or the Labour Party or the Conservative.
So Adam,
calm yourself, Matthew.
So Adam, can I just ask you?
Calm yourself, Matthew. No, you can't.
Perfectly calm. So Adam, can I just ask?
No, you can't, Matthew. You need to calm because Lily's turn next. No, it's Lily's turn now because she's been very patient so far. Lily.
Yeah. Well, no, I agree with the majority of the guests here have said. I mean, I don't see an argument for revoking the Human Rights Act and introducing the British Bill of Rights. I don't see what additional rights we would be gained, and I don't see the argument why it would be needed. I think the human rights are Human Rights Act at the moment is perfectly fine, perfectly right to keep that as is at the moment. The key thing about human rights is you have human rights to everyone. You don't have human rights to a certain number of people or for only native British people. So I would just say, Gareth, that I don't see the problem with the Human Rights Act. I don't see why we should revoke it, and I don't see why we should have human rights only dedicated to one section of society. Human rights should be for everyone, in my opinion.
Thank you very much. Okay, Matthew, you wanted to make a point.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Adam, because I don't think he has actually clarified this.
In fact, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Matthew. I'm going to ask Harry to come in first because Harry's got an appointment he's got to get to, and then I will come back to you. And this will be Harry's last contribution. Harry.
Just want to say something before dashing off to watch the Apprentice final, which is
Don't tell us that. We'll lose an audience.
the TV event of the year. I'd just like to say, a couple of accusations have been levied at me on Twitter, claiming that I hate democracy and that human rights should be subject to democratic vote. No, I don't hate democracy, but I think that democracy has to have checks and balances. Human rights are one of those. Human rights must never, ever, 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 ever be voted upon by anybody. They are sacrosanct. They're what everybody enjoys, and so therefore are inviolable. Adam has said that there might be cases about same-sex marriage and prisoners' rights. Well, yeah, great. That's what the point of a court is, to arbitrate on these issues which the people should have no say over whatsoever. Personally, if same-sex marriage came to the Court of Human Rights and was imposed on all people, great. I think that's a fantastic idea.
Do you think that religious faith leaders should be able to conduct marriages that they believe in?
Yes, because if they are part of the established, if they're part of the establishment, so the Church of England, like they are in this country, they should be forced to obey the same laws of equality that everybody else has to abide by. But that's my final contribution for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you very much indeed.
Up with rights,
okay.
down with no rights. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Okay, a couple of more comments from anyone here on the human rights issue before we move on to our next topic, which is going to be international affairs, and we'll be looking at Crimea and Israel. Anyone on the human rights issue?
Oh, human rights issue?
Yeah, just to finish off.
No.
No? Okay.
No.
Oh. Well, then we'll go international. This year has seen some big events around the world, things that have been, in many parts, destabilizing, as well as the ongoing conflict in parts of the Middle East, in particular in Syria. We have seen some major conflict in Israel with the Palestinian territories, and of course in the Ukraine with Russia and Vladimir Putin, and in particular the Crimean Peninsula. These have been things that have aroused a lot of political debate and a lot of passions, not just in the UK but across the world. And so we'd like to know what your view is at home. Again, tweet us what you think about these matters and how you think we and America and others should have behaved on them. And panel, I'm going to ask you, when it comes to these issues, Israel, Crimea, Syria, any of those other big international issues that are going on, what your view is. And Alessia, I'm going to be cruel. I'm going to come to you first, because so far you've not really had the first word on anything, I don't think.
You've taken me away the opportunity to actually think about it.
Go on. I mean, just your first reaction. I mean, as you've watched these events unfold during the year in Crimea, in Israel, and in Syria, what's your response been? What do you think about them?
Well, the main thing is that it makes you really realize how much the world has changed and how interconnected everything is, and that everything that happens, even the smallest thing, can have one incredibly huge, proper, like, on huge scale consequences, and that is like you cannot ever always control what is going to happen. So it's kind of scary in a way, because you would want to be able to do like, okay, yeah, we have the nation state, mind their own business, and then everybody else minds their own. That's not the case anymore. So
thank you very much. Matthew, I cut you off last time and I apologise, so I'm going to give you a free rein on this international question.
I'm not sure I've got a great lot to say about it, to be honest.
Give us a go. No? All right. Well, let's. I mean, what do you think? Because the Parliament, of course, voted on the issue of taking part in conflict in Syria earlier on this year, and I know you took a particular position on that. What was your view? Should Britain have joined in with attacking IS in Syria or not, and why?
Yeah, I mean, I tended to. Well, I mean, it was a judgment call, wasn't it? And obviously, Parliament. It was. I had on these occasions. I don't know how much of a positive impact has really been made. Syria has gone off the news agenda in recent months. I'd be interested. I don't honestly know what the current situation is with it, really.
And okay, thank you very much, Lily.
Yes, about Syria in particular, Gareth.
Syria or any of the others, entirely up to you.
Yeah, I think Syria is a lot more difficult to deal with because in terms of Iraq, we are technically under international law able to intervene in Iraq because the Iraqi government says, yeah, you can do that. But in terms of Syria, we can't get through a resolution through the UN because Russia is opposed to it, obviously, because they're very aggressive. And so in terms of Syria, it's very, very difficult to argue to get involved. For a start, in terms of actually intervening against ISIS in Syria, we would have to go against international law to get involved in the first place. So I think the argument to intervene against ISIS is the right one. We should intervene against ISIS in Iraq, particularly. We have an international mandate for that. But in terms of Syria, I'm not too sure exactly what we can do because it's the messy situation of a civil war. You got Assad, who's a dictator. You got ISIS, who are messy, and you don't really have a responsible opposition in terms of Syria. So I think in terms of Syria, I don't see an argument for intervention. But if you're talking about ISIS in general, I do think there is an argument against ISIS. But just as long as there isn't ground troops, which does seem to be the case now, we seem to be having ground troops in Iraq, which I think is completely wrong. So.
Thank you very much. Just a few of the comments that people have left so far. Stu Crow is saying, our Syria policy has been wrong since the outset. We should have backed Assad to crush Islamists 3 years ago, and we should do so now. Will Bates, I think there's a good case for Russia to have the Crimea, as shown by the fact that 90% speak Russian. John Mousley, hello John, another former guest here. I still don't know why we cheered the fall of an elected head of state in Ukraine. It's an odd standard to set. And then he's saying that there should be a Kurdish state now. Adam.
Sorry. I think I kind of have to agree with Lily in a sense, but maybe not. I think it is really. I think it's time to intervene. I think we have been. I think that's a good idea, and I think we should have started helping the Americans dropping the bombs. It was probably wrong, I think, to go into Iraq. Because there wasn't sufficient evidence. If there is sufficient evidence that there is something going on, you look at what ISIS are doing. They're killing innocent people. They're killing British, American citizens. They're killing our families, our husbands, wives. Well, husbands at the moment, obviously. I wouldn't be surprised if it would go into killing innocent British women as well. I think we should intervene because of those reasons, and we need to get through to them that it's not right. And I think would be. That's about it, really. I think we should. I think it's time. I think it's right to intervene.
Thank you very much indeed. A couple of comments here. I mean, Cameron's made an extremely good comment about my jumper, which I'm just retweeting. However, the really important one here that I think is worth, I'd like people's views on. This is from Thomas Smith at Smudge Thomas. This is what happens when you have a weak superpower. There's been argument that actually a lot of these things have happened because President Obama has been pretty weak when it comes to international affairs. Israel has got away with more than it would have done. Russia has got away with more than it would have done. And the interaction and so on in Syria has been so slow that things have got out of hand. Does anyone have any particular views on that?
No, I disagree with that, Gareth. I think in terms of Russia, I think Obama's taken the appropriate response. I think it's been excellent in terms of Russia. The Russians annexed Crimea, which is completely wrong. Obama couldn't really do anything about that. And then Russian rebels in East Ukraine, and Obama has led the way with Europe in introducing sanctions against Russia, and they're starting to hurt now. And I think one interesting gossip is at the moment, Gareth, is Saudi Arabia and the US are directly on purpose lowering the oil price through increasing supply. So I think in terms of Russia, the economic sanctions are starting to hurt. So I think in terms of Russia, I think Obama's taken the appropriate response. I think he's been slightly weak in terms of Syria because he was essentially saying, yeah, we're going to intervene. Oh, sugar, Congress isn't going to agree. The United Kingdom hasn't agreed. I'll back off now. So I think in terms of Syria, he's U-turned. He's seen as weak. In Russia, he's done the right policy. In terms of Israel, I think he's tried his best. I mean, he tried to get a peace deal between Palestine and Israel. But it's very, very tricky because what's your alternative? What's your suggestion to do? It's very, very tricky. It's very easy to criticize Obama without making suggestions saying, okay, we're going to do this.
Would these events have happened? In particular, I'm thinking of Russia and Crimea. Would these have happened under if we'd had Presidents Bush or Clinton in the White House? It seems unlikely
didn't it?
that would have happened.
In terms of Georgia, Russia invaded Georgia, so it did happen.
Interesting point. Yeah. Adam, did you want to add something here?
Yeah, I just want to touch on being on just to go to Israel and Palestine and the Gaza and stuff like that. Because I noticed a few people on Twitter were talking about that. Being George Galloway, for instance, he's pro-Palestine. A lot of the Christians in the UK, they're pro-Israel. But I think it's important that we kind of hear both sides, and I'm not really either, because I still haven't heard both arguments, and I don't see why you should be pro-Israel or pro-Palestine. And to touch on Lily's point, I think Obama has been cornered basically, and that he's taken the right response, and I agree with Lily on that element.
Thank you very much indeed. Anyone else want to comment on the international subject?
I'll just add a couple of quick things. I mean, I think on Israel and Palestine, I think we're sadly probably as far away from a two-state solution as we've ever been, and it's just an ongoing tragedy in that part of the world. And I think it's interesting this week, talking of Obama, that he's decided to start normalising relations with Cuba. I think it's entirely right to do so, but I think it's interesting that I think maybe he is now looking for big legacy things from his presidency, which his presidency has in many respects been a disappointment. The symbolism of him being president is amazing, but his actual presidency I don't think has really lived up to that by and large. Of course, it's not been helped by the fact that the Republicans have been out to attack him the whole time. But I think the interesting thing of him normalising relations with Cuba, or beginning to, is that that's something that presidents either haven't been willing to do or haven't managed to achieve in decades, in a very long time. So I guess that could be a big legacy thing for him.
Thank you very much. Does anyone want to say anything else on foreign affairs before we move on to our final topics?
No.
Okay. This one's been suggested by one of our viewers. Thank you, Daniel, who was asking who's your MP of the year, and I'm going to broaden that out. And you can have, if you want, an MP and a politician of the year, and it can be British and or international. Let me come. Who'd like to start off on this one? In fact, I'm going to be selfish. I'm going to start off on this one. For me, I'm going to pick my British and international politicians of the year. My British one will be Alex Salmond, because much as I disagree with many of his policies and his politics, he's a man who has come back from political death several times, and he led his country and his cause to very near victory in an independence referendum just a couple of months ago. And when you consider that independent support for Scottish independence was very frequently in the early 20 percentage points, and he got it up to 45%. And as a result has then created this sort of rolling stone effect for the SNP has been absolutely phenomenal. And whatever your views of him, he is an amazing politician who, for his cause, has done sterling work. I also nominate Vladimir Putin, not for good reasons, because I think the man is a bit of a loose cannon, and I think he's a danger to the international community. And whereas Russia, having gone through the post-communist phase, could have taken a persuasive place at the top of world politics, it could have used its links with particularly places like Syria and China and other countries to really improve world security and safety. Putin has put his ultra-nationalist hat on and instead has presented a face that has caused greater instability in many parts of the world. He's done so whilst remaining increasingly popular at home. Of course, few people would say that Russia is truly a democracy in that sense anymore because of the way in which opposition and opponents at all levels are treated there. But there's no denying that perhaps he is one of the people who's had the greatest impact on international politics this year. Not for good reasons, but that's the reason why I would nominate him. I don't know if anyone else wants to nominate theirs or comment on those, or both.
Yeah, I will then, Gareth. I
Billy.
think my UK politician of the year is probably a strange one, but I'll give my reasons shortly, would be Ed Balls. The reason why I say Ed Balls is, in the 2013 autumn statement, he did a horrendous response. He was awful in his response. He was red, there was lots of memes about him, he was being laughed at. I said he should go because he was so bad. And then what you seem to see from Ed Balls in the last couple of months and the end of the year, as he seems to be fantastic. I mean, his autumn statement response was fantastic. Labour, although they're still behind in terms of economic competence, in terms of the economic argument, in terms of the polls, Labour seems to be really tearing into the coalition now. I mean, if you looked at the economy at the beginning of 2014, the economy, many people were saying, oh, the economy's going to be great, follow it, by the end of 2014, the Tories are going to get the majority, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the economy is, seems to be going backwards. Ed Balls seems to be delivering a fantastic response. So my UK politician here would be Ed Balls, because I think he's done a great job compared to 2013. And my international politician here would be Bill Shorten. He's the Australian Labour Party leader. And what you've seen from him in this year, he's torn Tony Abbott to pieces. Tony Abbott and his coalition government has been in complete scandal in many ways over so many U-turns, and Bill Shorten is completely torn into him. And especially when the Australian Labour Party in 2013 were, divided, it was a mess. What you see from the Australian Labour Party now under Bill Shorten is they seem to be completely unified. So my international politician here would be Bill Shorten, and my UK politician here would be Ed Balls.
Thank you very much indeed. Let's check, Lily. Bill Shorten, when he was in the cabinet of Julia Gillard, wasn't he the cabinet minister who gave the interview, asked about the situation of Peter Slipper, the Speaker of the Australian Parliament, and he said, whatever the Prime Minister said, I agree with it fully. And he didn't know what it was the Prime Minister had said.
Maybe, Gareth. I'm not going to confirm or deny that. It's in the past. We need to focus on 2016.
Fair enough. Alessia.
Mine, I hope it's not going to be too controversial, but I would like to say my politician of the year is going to be Fiona Bruce for bringing about to success a very controversial bill like the abortion sex selection one.
Okay, and what is it about that because some people might not know what that was. Why is that an important thing?
It is because the current abortion bill was not exactly clear on the reasons why you can abort a child. Therefore, they found a very high numbers of girls who is clear that they were hiding the fact they were being aborted just for being girls. So the bill was to make the law clearer in that. But in a climate issue, and therefore you can not touch that one, then I feel that this was a very courageous thing to do.
Do you have an international politician of the year?
Not really. No, I should think more about it. But I don't think anybody on the national scale would really be worth a mention.
Thank you very much indeed, Matthew.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my MP of the year would be Naomi Long, the MP of the Alliance Party of Northern Ireland, who has done her job assiduously, being under considerable threat. And the Alliance Party as a whole, I have a friend who's in the Alliance Party. In fact, he was on your programme last week, Stephen Donnan.
Indeed.
I think in many respects the Alliance Party has been the bravest party in these Isles this past year. They've been under disgraceful threat from people who didn't like a decision over the Union Jack or the British flag, and decided to launch attacks, a number of attacks over a number
Okay, Matthew, you're breaking up a little.
Have come through this year.
You've broken up a little, Matthew. So if you want to go back a sentence or two and just repeat.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I was just talking about Naomi Long and the fact that her and the Alliance Party have been under threat after a decision on a local council in Northern Ireland to do with the British flag, and the disgraceful attempted attacks on her and on Alliance Party property really have been dreadful. And so the fact that Naomi Long has continued to represent her constituents in the face of that threat means she's my MP of the year. My politician of the year, although it's also an MP, but I have to mention a Liberal Democrat, don't I, is Tim Farron, the outgoing president of the Liberal Democrats, who I'm not ashamed to say at conference his speech made me cry as I was sat there in the hall watching it. His speech about active liberalism, it's one of the best political speeches I've ever heard, and I'd advise anyone, whether a Lib Dem or not, to go back and have a look at that speech. And I'd like to remember an international politician who sadly passed away this year, and who I wrote a bit about at the time on Lib Dem Voice, and that's Gough Whitlam, talking of Australian Labor people. He was only Australian PM for 3 years, but he was a radical and reforming Australian Labor Prime Minister who brought in many good policies, and in many ways brought Australian politics into the latter half of the 20th century.
Thank you very much indeed. And I think he's coming back to us any second. Will be Adam. You'll notice we've had quite a lot of popularity with the Australians here at this point in time. Alessia, did you have an international one at this point?
Okay, I might go for an international one, and it's quite surprising given the country I've chosen. I would like to be a bit of credit to a very unpopular prime minister in Europe, which is Matteo Renzi in Italy, because he's actually trying to do something about that country, which is going down, like down the pit. So it's very unpopular, and I can understand why, but he's at least trying to do something, and that he might get a mention for that.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed. And Adam, your nominee for UK and International Politicians of the Year.
Yeah, apologies about that. I think the internet just went down then.
Worry not.
Yes, sorry about that. International politician, I just want to start off with that. I've thought about it throughout the debate, and of all the ones that you've all mentioned, I probably wouldn't go as controversial to say Vladimir Putin, but I'm not really sure. I don't really have one, an international one. I have one. I have a local one. I have a UK one. He's not necessarily an MP. He's actually an Assembly member for the Welsh Assembly government. He's the Shadow Health Minister for Wales. His name's Darren Millar. He's the Assembly member for Clwyd West. You obviously probably wouldn't heard of him.
I have, of course, because I'm a political anorak. But
well, he's not that far from Chile, but he's only obviously he's not as big as Vladimir Putin for that sure, or the Australian nominee. But I would say Darren, because he stood up for what he really does. He's very when he needs to scrutinise, he scrutinises the First Minister in First Minister's questions. He makes it very enjoyable to watch, and that's for sure. But I think the reason I'd nominate him definitely is because of his standing up, especially on health issues. The Welsh NHS has been in a lot of arguments, a lot of debates, especially in Prime Minister's questions about how it's controlled. And I think Darren has clearly said something on that, and especially standing up for the cancer drugs fund that a lot of people in Wales think we should have. Welsh Labour completely saying no, we shouldn't, but even the UK Labour Party now said we'll keep the cancer drugs fund. So I definitely nominate Darren Millar for Politician of the Year in the UK.
Thank you very much indeed. Some of the nominees that people have given us online. We've had Liam Bones nominating Theresa May and Angela Merkel as his. A lot of these have spread debate. Daniel who came up with this idea for this topic. Caroline Lucas is his nominee. Where are we? We've had someone else here mention. No, naturally, it's all gone haywire, and I can't see anything anyone said. Oh, here we are. Max Ethan Rogers. He's nominating Jim Murphy for UK and Jean-Claude Juncker for International Politician of the Year. Bradley Booth, again, another former broadcaster of the day. Hello, Bradley. Bradley B95. UK, Alex Salmond. International, Alex Stubb of Finland. And Joshua Kerridge at Joshua Kerridge1. Hello. How about Rand Paul, showing that Republicans do care about every race and background? Will Bates, a case could be made for Beppe Grillo, who has made a political party out of nothing. So there we are. We've got quite a nice range there of people. Alessia, I wonder, Beppe Grillo has just been mentioned. I like that reaction. I mean, you know, we've heard about him a little from the Five Star Movement. What's your view of Beppe?
No, you're really going down a controversial route. My opinion is he was a comedian and not a very good one, and over other comedians and not very good ones could get involved in politics is not almost not as bad as Russell Brand, but it's not that. Yeah, the marketing agency behind him, and yeah, he managed to move a lot of people who were not really that engaged in politics, and it's not that surprising he's becoming best friend with Nigel Farage. But really, if we stick to doing what he was doing before, that probably wouldn't be much better.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, our final brief discussion here. I'm going to ask each of our panelists to give us their prediction for what we might be talking about this time next year. What might be the big story of 2015 for them, and if you want to look at what do you think might the result of the election be, that could well be it. So, 2015, what's going to be the big story there? Matthew. Who has vanished? That was, oh no, is he back? Lily, I'll come to you in the meantime whilst Matthew appears to have vanished.
My prediction for next year?
Yes, 2015. What's it going to be about?
What's it going to be about? I think, for a start, I think Ed Miliband will be the next Prime Minister in 2015. That would be my first prediction. I think the question is whether Labour will... The thing is, Gareth, if you would have asked me in, I don't know, August, September 2014, I would have said, oh, I don't know, it's very, very close. But as you've seen the polls very recently, Gareth, you know, the polls showed two opinion polls showing a 7-point lead for Labour. Then there was a 5-point lead for Labour. Then there was a 2-point lead for Labour. So Labour seems to have a good majority, opinion poll majority, going into the 2015 general election. So I think Labour's either going to get a small majority, or they're just going to miss out, I think. So I think they could do a coalition with the Liberal Democrats, or they'll govern alone. But I think it's going to still be very, very close. There's a lot to discuss. I think UKIP's going to collapse slightly. You know, the commentators on the Daily Mail, the Daily Express are going to be crying, saying there's a scandal. So I think UKIP's going to go down. I think the Greens aren't going to do as good as people think. I think the Lib Dems aren't going to do as bad as people think. I think the Lib Dems will still hold about 20, 30 seats. So very, very close.
You. Adam, 2015. What are your predictions?
I agree with Lily. It's going to be very close who governs the next UK Parliament, who gets the keys to number 10 Downing Street. I think the Conservatives are going to come out as the biggest party, and that's not. I know that's probably like, well, how ironic that is. Conservatives saying that the Conservatives are going to come in with this party. You know, I'm sure people would say that the party can't relay that UKIP and Liberal Democrats. In the right instance, the Lib Dems probably aren't going to do as bad as people think. Like, I agree with that. UKIP, I think that, you know, I think it's really optimistic. I think Nigel Farage is very optimistic in saying we probably will be able to hold the balance of power. They are predicting about 4 seats. That is not holding the balance of power. Holding the balance of power is what the Lib Dems had last election, what the SNP are polling to have. That's holding the balance of power, not UKIP. I think the Conservatives are going to come out. Whether we get in a majority or not, I think with the more campaigning that we're doing, we've come back up in the polls. And I think because we've come back up in the polls, I think we could get a majority, but it's going to be a very small one if we do. But I would say that UKIP isn't going to be a massive threat. And I think just like the European Parliament elections in 2009, they didn't repeat anywhere near the success they did in the 2010 general election. So I think they're going to be a threat in next year's general election. Not a massive one anyway.
Thank you very much. Alessia.
Are we going to stay within the UK future news, or are we going on the international question again?
Whatever you prefer. What do you think might be a big
I
story in
have one
2015?
international one. I think we might have some surprises. Who's going to be possibly the female candidate in the 2016 American elections?
That's a good point. Elizabeth Warren?
Yeah, looks like she might be taking over from the expected Queen Clinton.
Gotcha. And Matthew?
Hello. Yeah, I should have mentioned Elizabeth Warren earlier. I think she's a fantastic senator, and I think the potential battle between her and Hillary Clinton for the Democratic nomination for president could be certainly a big one for 2016. But obviously, we're in the run-up to that now. In terms of our election, I agree with the other panelists. It's going to be extremely close. I make a prediction, though, that though I think the Lib Dems probably will lose seats, I think we will remain. I think we'll do better than people think. Some of our MPs are very well thought of in their constituencies, and they are fighting very, very hard indeed, and are polling much better in their particular constituencies than we are nationwide. So I'm not saying we won't lose seats, but I think one of the big stories will be how resilient the Liberal Democrats end up being, and that we'll retain a big enough parliamentary force to potentially still be in government after next May. I think we, and indeed other bigger minor parties, if that makes sense, such as potentially the SNP and indeed potentially UKIP, could have an interesting choice, because of course we could have a situation that one major party has the most votes and another major party has the most seats. Who then has the mandate to govern?
Like 1974. Okay, a couple of comments, and then I'm going to ask for closing comments from my guests here. Joshua Kerridge 1. What are we going to be talking about next year? Why are we in another recession, maybe? Cameron is telling us that, of course, we'll be talking about his rise to power. Please remember, Cameron, I was always nice to you, and we did it with swag. I promised him I'd say that. Will Bates is saying that the Greens will retain their current MP and nothing more. UKIP will gain due to targeted campaigns. Bradley Booth, there'll be a Labour minority in 2015, or a Tory one. It won't make much of a difference, just as long as the SNP get 20 plus seats. And Weird Times, all the general election outcomes are bad for England, as the UK Parliament always gets in. John Mousley is saying UKIP will have 10 plus MPs. My own view, again, coloured perhaps by my own bias, is that it's very likely there'll be another coalition between the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats, who I think will probably retain 25 to 30 seats in total. UKIP will end up with 2 or 3, and they're going to be a hell of a busted flush, and there'll be massive arguments on the 8th and 9th of May about how they got it all so terribly badly wrong, and Labour are going to do very poorly. It'll be the Neil Kinnock effect from '92. People will go into the polling booth thinking, I'm going to vote Labour, and then they just can't picture Ed Miliband on the steps of number 10, and of course they're then going to be doubly shafted by the SNP in Scotland. That's my view for the election. I'm going to ask brief comments from each of you before we finish tonight's show. Adam.
Well, just touching on the UK Parliament, I think obviously it is going to be very close, and I can't agree that. I think the Lib Dems, like I said again, the Lib Dems are probably going to do a bit better than people think. It's not always about percentage. You look at the polls, the Lib Dems actually were polling it about 33% at one point. They could have formed a minority government on their own. They dropped, admittedly, but they could probably come back. And I think a UKIP's bubble is going to burst that after this election. I think Nigel Farage hasn't really got a chance of getting elected. I really don't think he's going to get into the Parliament, and I think I'm probably going to be glad that he's not going to be in Parliament, and I'm happy that he's not going to be able to get in. UKIP aren't going to be able to hold the balance of power. But just quickly as well, they've also said that they aim to be the official election in the Welsh Assembly in 2016. Well, I know we're talking about 2015. I just want to on that. This is a party that has no assembly members that reckons they can get more than what Black Cymru and the Conservatives have got. And honestly, they'll probably beat the Liberal Democrats, because the Lib Dems are going to end up with about 2 seats in the Assembly, whereas UKIP probably end up below Black Cymru. So I think UKIP are being optimistic, and I don't really think we have to worry about UKIP as much as the polls are telling us.
Thank you very much indeed. Alessia, any final comments?
Kind of one. I think that the election is going to be much more interesting than people are going to make it out now, because now everybody's going to bring about many parties. What if we're going to end up with a surprise?
Thank you. Matthew, your closing comments?
Thank you, Gareth. Yeah, I mean, I certainly would make one prediction, which is that Tim Farron will become the leader of the Liberal Democrats in the middle of next year, and that we could potentially see him become Deputy Prime Minister in a progressive government with Labour, if all of my political dreams come true, Gareth. You know, I just, without wanting to suck up to our host here too much, I think one of the great things of this year has been the creation of this programme, and I think from a fledgling start, it and programmes like it will go on to become increasingly important next year, and because many of us are totally fed up with the likes of Question Time, which I must admit I can't abide watching anymore, and I look forward to us having many more interesting debates like this next year.
Thank you. You can come back. Lily.
Yes, just to respond to Matthew's point very quickly, I do think Nick Farron will be the next Lib Dem leader. I don't think, unfortunately for you, Matthew, I don't think he's going to be the next Deputy Prime Minister. But one point I would make is, throughout the whole of 2014, we've heard so many politicos like Dan Hodge say, oh, it's closing up, you know, it's getting closer, Labour's falling, But as we've seen lately, Gareth, we've got 2 opinion polls showing a 7-point lead. I thought the government regains popular support in the polls.
There was also one poll showing a 4% Conservative lead, so these polls are literally all over the place.
It's actually 3. So we've got 2 7-point leads, then we've got a 5-point lead, and yet we've consistently heard that it's going to close up, and it hasn't happened. So I think it seems to me that Ed Miliband will be the next Prime Minister. It just depends whether it's going to be a coalition with the SNP or the Liberal Democrats, or it'll be a minority government. So I think that's the question, rather than the notion that David Cameron remaining as Prime Minister.
Well, thank you for that, Lily. Thank you all very much to my guests here for taking part in this different kind of show to finish 2014. Thank you all very much at home for your hundreds of comments on Twitter. Let's see if any of you have taken part in the Applause app. We will return on the first Sunday in January. We're going to have a week off over Christmas and New Year. People can forget all about politics for a short while and actually try and enjoy life for that short period. Very, very grateful for everyone who's taken part in our first 9 or 10 shows. Very grateful for all of you at home or wherever you are for taking part, for watching, for tweeting, for challenging our guests. You are very welcome to come in and join us by appearing down here wherever they are in future shows. Don't forget, in January, one of our shows will be dedicated to the issue of England and English devolution. They will, however, not feature this jumper again, so say goodbye to it now. Thank you all very much indeed, and it only remains for me to wish you all a very happy Christmas and New Year. We'll see you in 2015. Goodbye.